Folks, let me tell you something. The Democrat Party, right now, today, in the year of our Lord 2026, is running hard into the arms of socialism. And they are not tiptoeing, they are sprinting. New York City just had its primary elections. And what happened? A socialist mayor, Zoran Mamdani. This guy, a Democratic socialist who makes Bernie Sanders look like Ronald Reagan. His candidates swept. His people won. And the base of the Democrat Party looked at that result and said, "More, please." More, please. That's where they are. And on top of that, we have Democrats trying to pack the Supreme Court again, because they can't win at the Supreme Court, so they want to build a bigger one, stack it, load it, tip the scales. And then we have a congressional candidate in New York, a woman named Liza Avila Chevalier, who just beat an incumbent. And James Carville, the raging Cajun himself, the man who looks like a haunted bobblehead, even he is saying she shouldn't be seated in the Democrat caucus. I'm Rick LeBow, this is Rush Hour, and we are just getting started. My friends, what we witnessed in New York this week is not a blip. It is not a hiccup. It is not some weird fever dream that the Democrat Party is going to wake up from. This is the direction. This is the destination. They have bought their ticket and they are on the train, and that train has Socialist Express painted on the side. Now, let me take you through what happened, because it is instructive, it is fascinating, and I say that with the full weight of a man who has been predicting exactly this for, going on 30 years now. Tuesday night, New York City primary elections. Zoran Mamdani, the new mayor-elect of New York City, a Democratic socialist. His backed candidates ran the table, 3 of them, including this woman, Liza Avila Chevalier, who beat Adriano Espaillat. Now, Espaillat was the incumbent. He was no moderate, let me tell you. But apparently he was not left enough for the current Democrat base in New York. He was a rounding error away from being a socialist himself, and they still threw him out. And who replaced him? A woman who, based on what is being reported, holds views so far outside the mainstream that even James Carville, who has spent the last 40 years defending the indefensible on behalf of the Democrat Party, even he said she shouldn't be seated in the caucus. When you've lost James Carville, folks, when the guy who ran Bill Clinton's war room looks at your candidate and says, "No, not this one," that is saying something. Now, what does the rest of the Democrat Party do with this information? What does Ro Khanna do? Ro Khanna, congressman from California, who fancies himself as the thoughtful, intellectual face of the progressive left. What does he say after all of this? Does he say we need to pump the brakes? Does he say maybe the voters in the rest of America aren't quite ready for full-bore socialism? No. He doubles down. He says the party should embrace this direction. Incredible. See, here is what is happening. And I know this like I know every square inch of my gloriously magnificent frame. The Democrat Party has a base problem. Their base, the people who show up to primaries, the people who knock on doors, the people who post 17 times a day on social media, those people have moved way out past where the average American voter lives. And the politicians, the ones who are supposed to be the adults in the room, they are chasing that base because they are terrified of being primaried. So what you get is a feedback loop. The base gets more radical, the politicians follow. The politicians get more radical, the base expects more, and round it goes. And at some point, and we may be there, the party that results from all of that looks nothing like the party that could ever win a national election. Now, the drive-by media will not tell you this. The drive-by media will tell you this is a sign of voter enthusiasm, and the progressive wing is energized, and all of that. What they will not tell you is that every single time a major American city has been run by people with these ideas, the city has gotten worse, not better, worse. Look at New York. Look at what the years of de Blasio did. Look at what the years of sanctuary policies and defund the police sentiment and all the rest of it did to a city that used to be the greatest city in the world. And what does New York do? It elects Zohran Mamdani. They look at the results and they say, we need more of that, but harder. I am not making this up. I have this story right here in my formerly nicotine-stained fingers, and I could not make this up if I tried. Now, here's the part that gets really interesting, because this is where it connects to the national picture. Trump and the Republican Party, they have been looking for a unified message going into the midterms. What do you run on when you're the incumbent party? Usually, that's a harder question than it sounds. You've been in charge, things have happened, you have to defend the record, and the opposition can just throw everything at the wall. But the New York results may have just handed Republicans the gift they didn't even know they were waiting for. Because now the question is simple. The question is, do you want what New York just chose? Do you want the socialism, the open borders crowd, the people who think the answer to every problem is more government, more spending, more control? Or do you want the people who think America works best when Americans are left alone to build their own lives? That's a clean choice. That is about as clean a choice as you are going to get in American politics. And historically, when that choice is put clearly in front of the American people, they do not choose socialism. They have never chosen socialism because they've seen what it does. It doesn't work. It has never worked. It will never work. And no amount of rebranding it as democratic socialism or people-centered economics or whatever new packaging they come up with this cycle is going to change what it is underneath. And here's something else I want to point out, because it goes to the character of this moment. The Democrats are also, and this is running simultaneously, trying to revive the old FDR court packing scheme. They want to add justices to the Supreme Court by matching the number of justices to the number of federal circuits. Sounds technical, sounds boring, and that is exactly the point. Make it sound boring so nobody pays attention. What it means in plain English is we can't win at the Supreme Court the way it is, so we're going to add enough justices that we can win. That is not a judicial philosophy. That is a power grab. That is as pure a power grab as you will see in American politics. And they are not even being shy about why they want to do it. The Supreme Court has been ruling against their agenda. The Supreme Court has been saying, no, you can't do that. The Constitution doesn't permit that. And the response from the left is not to change their agenda. The response is to change the court, to break the institution that is standing between their agenda and the rest of us. Franklin Roosevelt tried this in 1937. He was at the height of his political power. He had won in a landslide. He had Congress in his pocket, and he still couldn't get it done because the American people looked at it and said, that's not right. That is not how this works. That is not what this country is supposed to be. And it failed. And Roosevelt's prestige took a serious hit from which he never quite fully recovered. And the Democrats today look at that episode and apparently think, what went wrong? How do we do it better this time? That is where we are. I'll tell you something else. You've got a candidate, this Chevalier woman, and I mentioned that Carville said she shouldn't be seated. Part of why he's saying that is some of her views are, let's say, very particular. But here's the thing. She won. She won the primary. The Democrat voters in that district looked at what was on offer, and they chose her. And now you have an internal Democrat civil war playing out in public, with James Carville on one side saying, this is too far, and Ro Khanna on the other side saying, embrace it. That is a party that does not know who it is. That is a party having an identity crisis in slow motion in public, and the drive-by media is covering it as if it's a sign of healthy democratic small d debate. When really what it is a party being pulled apart at the seams by people who fundamentally disagree on whether America is a country worth saving or a country that needs to be rebuilt from scratch. Now, see, I know what I think about that. I know exactly what I think about that. I think America is the greatest country that has ever existed on this planet. I think 250 years of evidence supports that conclusion pretty convincingly. And I think the people who want to tear it down, who want to replace free markets with government planning and individual liberty with collective obligation, I think those people are wrong. Not just politically wrong, wrong in the way that people are wrong when they get the fundamental nature of human beings wrong. People thrive when they are free. People stagnate when they are managed. That is not a theory. That is the record of every civilization that has ever tried it either way. And the American experiment is the greatest proof of that proposition the world has ever seen. The Democrats running in New York this week don't believe that. And the voters who backed them don't believe it either. And that, my friends, is the real story of Tuesday night. Not just who won or who lost, but what it tells us about where a significant chunk of this country's political class has arrived. Don't doubt me on this one. All right, folks, the roundup. Rapid fire. We're moving. Let's go. First up, the FBI. FBI Deputy Director Chris Raya came out this week and said that battlefield-style drone attacks, the kind you've been seeing in Ukraine, the kind that have been wreaking havoc on military targets overseas, he says it is only a matter of time before they happen here in the United States on American soil. He said someone sitting in China could be piloting a drone over New Orleans right now if they wanted to. Now, I want you to sit with that for a second, because for the last several years, we have been told that the border was fine, that worrying about what was coming across it made you a nativist, that ICE, the agency that enforces immigration law, was somehow the villain of the story. And now, the FBI is telling us that the drone warfare technology that has revolutionized the battlefield in Europe could show up here, potentially operated by our adversaries from thousands of miles away. And here's the kicker. We have a watchdog report out this week saying that Missouri State University ran an MBA program that trained over 1,500 Chinese executives with ties to China's military-industrial complex. 1,500 at a red state university. This wasn't happening at Berkeley or Columbia. This was in Missouri. The Chi-Coms are not subtle about what they are doing. They are everywhere. They are in our universities. They are potentially over our cities. And we have spent years being told by the establishment that the real threat to America was the people who voted for Trump. Meanwhile, the actual adversary, the one with a stated desire to surpass us and replace us as the world's dominant power, has been operating in our universities and our airspace and our supply chains basically unchallenged. The FBI warning is serious. The Missouri State story is serious. And when you put them together, the picture is not a comfortable one. Pay attention to this. This is not going away. Second item, Ruben Gallego. Senator Ruben Gallego of Arizona, a man who has been positioning himself as a reasonable, family values sort of Democrat, the kind of guy who shows up to things with his kids, talks about being a dad. His allies have been pushing this wholesome image pretty hard. And this week, conservatives reminded everyone of a relevant data point that the drive-by media had been very politely not mentioning. Gallego served his wife divorce papers while she was 9 months pregnant. 9 months. Now, I'm not here to adjudicate anyone's marriage. People get divorced. It happens. But when you are running around wrapping yourself in the family man banner, when your political brand is built on being this stand-up guy, when your pals are out there defending you in those terms, and then someone points out that you handed your 9 months pregnant wife divorce papers, that's what we used to call a character question. And the media, our friends in the drive-by press, had apparently decided that character question was not worth raising. Funny how that works. Funny how that calculation always seems to go one direction. Third, Democrats reviving the court packing scheme. I hit this in the main event, but I want to come back to it briefly because there is a specific thing happening that deserves attention. The proposal being floated is to match the number of Supreme Court justices to the number of federal circuits. 13 circuits, 13 justices. Very tidy, very organized. What it actually means is adding 4 justices to a 9-justice court, all of whom would be nominated by a Democrat president in a Senate that would require Democrat votes to confirm. It is, in every sense that matters, an attempt to take a branch of government that has been an obstacle to the left's agenda and rebuild it so that it isn't anymore. FDR tried it. The country said no. I would like to think the country would say no again. But I will note that the Democrat Party of 2026 is not operating with a great deal of shame about these things. And they have a media that will describe this as a reform proposal and a structural adjustment, and probably find 12 law professors to explain why it's actually perfectly constitutional and in the finest tradition of American jurisprudence. Don't let them talk you out of what your common sense is telling you. When someone wants to add 4 justices to the Supreme Court, the question to ask is very simple. Why? And the answer is always the same. Because they're not winning with the court as it is. That's it. That's the whole thing. My friends, we are coming up on America's 250th birthday. July 4th is just around the corner, and it is worth pausing on that for a moment. 250 years. No country in the history of the world has done what this country has done. No country has taken more people from more places and turned them into one people with one set of shared ideals and produced the kind of liberty and prosperity that America has produced. That is not an accident. That is not luck. That is the result of an idea. The idea that men are created equal, that they are endowed with rights that no government gave them and no government can take away. The left wants to spend the 250th birthday of this country cataloging its sins and relitigating its founding and finding new ways to tell the American people that their history is something to be ashamed of. And some federal judge out there, in defiance of the Supreme Court itself, apparently, wants to make sure that George Washington's Philadelphia home keeps flying signs saying the beloved president mocked the nation's pretense to be a beacon of liberty. George Washington, the man who won the Revolution, the man who refused a kingship and went home to Mount Vernon, they want to define him by a sign on a building. That's what they've got. That's the best argument they can make. A sign on a building. I choose to look at what 250 years have actually produced. I choose to look at what this country has actually been to the world. The arsenal of democracy, the last best hope of Earth, the place people still cross oceans and deserts to get to. And I say we should be proud, not naive, not blind to failures, but proud. Proud that the experiment held. Proud that the Republic survived. Proud to be Americans. That's all I've got for today, folks. You've been with me through the whole thing. And as always, I am grateful for every single one of you. I'm Rick LeBow. This has been Rush Hour. Same time tomorrow if they let us back on.